Good day, everyone, and this is a recorded lecture for SS121 Ethics, particularly on the subtopics of cultural relativism and universal values according to the concept of James Rachel's. Okay? Now let us go directly by defining what is cultural relativism. First, guys, cultural relativism was first used in 1924 by the philosopher and social theorist Alain Locke. Okay? Now, from this concept, niingon siya nga cultural relativism explains why one behavior or practice is completely acceptable by a particular group of people while it is wrong in another. It refers to the idea that values, knowledge, and behavior of people must be understood within its own cultural context and not by the standards of other culture. From the definition of Rachel's, he said that cultural relativism, as it has been called, challenges our ordinary belief in the objectivity and universality of moral truth. It says, in effect, that there is no such thing as universal truth in ethics. There are only the various cultural codes and nothing more. Moreover, our own code has no special status. It is merely one among many. Okay? So para ma-summarize na to, dili na ta mag-taas kayo lecture, taas ta kayo malibog na taog samot. Naay duha ka main point ang cultural relativism nga ma-encapsulate sa ilahang ginatawag nga cultural differences argument. The premise is that different cultures have different moral codes. Therefore, nag-conclude siya nga there is no objective truth in morality. Right and wrong are only matters of opinion, and opinions vary from culture to culture. Now let us examine unsa man kining cultural differences argument. Tay examples. In the work of Rachel's called entitled The Challenge of Cultural Relativism, na siya duha ka particular examples gamit. The funeral practices of the Galatians and the Greeks, and then infanticide in the concept of Eskimos and present society. Okay? Si King Darius, he was a king of ancient Persia, na-observe niya nga na ay kalahian ang funeral practices between the Galatians and the Greeks. Sa Galatians, guys, they tend to eat the bodies of the dead. That is how they dispose of the bodies. Because they believe that there is a reason na this is the way that the spirit will dwell with them. Though it's quite different, difficult to understand, difficult to examine. But on the other hand, ang Greeks, ang ilang practice of how they dispose of the bodies of the dead is by cremating them through the use of a funeral pyre. So if you cannot imagine what a funeral pyre is, muna siyang kanang murag tag-as kay nga tower bitaw, especially kana mga high-ranking officers or even those soldiers. Diya sabayon na nila og sunog, mga kahoy na siya tapos dito sa ang lawas sa babaw, dayon ilahang sunugon. That is how they cremate the bodies of the dead. So different kay imagine ang isa ginakaon ang lawas sa patay, ang isa kay ginasunog, cremation. It's very difficult. It's different. It's very different from one another. Another is the practice of the Eskimos. The Eskimos are people who are living in North America and Greenland. Okay, these are areas that are quite remote and inaccessible. Ang ilahang practice dito sa Eskimos is that infanticide or the killing of infants is very common. Nga naman, si Nod Rasmussen, one of the most famous early explorers, reported that he met a one woman who had born 20 children but had killed 10 of them at birth. And the basis of this, or ganong infanticide, ganong okay na sila, is it is subject to the parents' discretion. Meaning, ang parents lang magbuot whether you kill this infant or not. And in their society, infanticide carries no social stigma. So wala lang sila, murag they accept it as truth. In other societies, particularly sa atua, we do not accept this kind of practice. It is quite unlawful. It is just simply wrong. Killing an infant is simply morally evil in our concept. Di ba? Kasi man butaw ay ganahan mo patay og kaning infant no? So, two kinds of different practices. Funeral practices of the Galatians and the Greeks, and then infanticide in the point of view of the Eskimos and this modern society that we are living in. Ngunay naga-support niining ilahang premise that different cultures have different moral codes. Furthermore, guys, i-elaborate pa gini ni Rachel's. Para mas masabdan pa ginato aside from that examples, naay unom. Although in the module, 5 lang to siya, pero naay unom nga points nga gustong i-highlight ni Rachel's. Nga mo ni naga-support sa claim sa cultural relativists. First, different societies have different moral codes. Sa kung gikaingon pa kanina. Ikaduha, there is no objective standard that can be used to judge one societal code better than another. Third, the moral code of our own society has no special status. It is merely one among many. Next, there is no universal truth in ethics. That is, there are no moral truths that hold for all peoples at all times. Fifth, the moral code of a society determines what is right within that society. That is, if the moral code of a society says that a certain action is right, then that action is right, at least within that society. Lastly, it is mere arrogance for us to try to judge the conduct of other peoples. We should adopt an attitude of tolerance towards the practices of other cultures. So these are the elaboration of the claim or the supporting arguments in the different societies have different moral codes or the cultural differences argument of the cultural relativists. But as we try to examine this kind of thinking, at first it might seem very persuasive. It might seem very plausible, di ba? There is no such thing as kining wrong, only different. Mo na'y gustong belief nga paabot sa cultural relativism. But when we try to examine it in a logical manner, rationally speaking, cultural relativism will not seem very plausible. So nga naman, okay, let us examine their argument. Katong examples nga gigamit ko kaganina, let us try to put it into the context of the cultural differences argument. Sige. Una, the Greeks believed it was wrong to eat the dead. Di ba? Kaya ang ilang practice, they burn the dead. They cremate the dead through the use of a funeral pyre. Whereas the Galatians believed it was right to eat the dead. Di ba? Kaya ang ilang practice, they eat the bodies of the dead. Conclusion. Therefore, eating the dead is neither objectively right nor objectively wrong. It is merely a matter of opinion, which varies from culture to culture. Second example, for the Eskimos, they see nothing wrong with infanticide, whereas Americans, for example, believe infanticide is immoral, or whereas society in general believe that infanticide is immoral. Okay? Therefore, infanticide is neither objectively right nor objectively wrong. It is merely a matter of opinion which varies from culture to culture. Okay? Now let us see whether tama ba gyud kind of thinking. The keyword to understand here, guys, is that the premise, meaning ang first statement, itong number one nga statement, it concerns what people believe. Subjective siya. So, syempre, since these are concerns about what people believe, they are subjective, simply subjective, naging differences. And when there are differences, then there is disagreement. That's the key word there. And then, in their conclusion, they assume that because there are differences, and therefore there is disagreement between the first statement, they concluded that there is no objective truth that will govern the practice being determined. Meaning, tungod kay nagkalahi-lahi og belief na ay disagreement on the Greeks and the Galatians on what is the correct way of disposing the dead. And in the second example, difference ang paglantaw na ay difference or na ay disagreement regarding sa infanticide between the Eskimos and the modern society or the society in general. Therefore, wala na objective truth that will decide whether the action is really wrong or really right. Mo na ilahang logical argument. But is it logical? No, it is not. The conclusion simply does not logically follow from the premise. Kung sa may example para mas masabta na to ni akong ibang istorya. In some societies, naka-encounter na ta og mga concept about flat earths. So some people, some group of people will really argue that the earth is not spherical, rather the earth is flat. But for us, we believe that earth is spherical. So na disagreement. Others believe that the earth is flat, others believe that the earth is spherical. But does it mean that because there is a disagreement between this matter that there is no objective truth that will determine the correctness of this concept? No. Geography will tell you that Earth, objectively speaking, is really spherical, roughly spherical in shape. Therefore, the other belief is just simply mistaken, and the other is quite correct. But not all people will accept this objective truth. Not all people will acknowledge this objective truth. And that is how the cultural differences argument will appeal to them. Just because some people do not accept or acknowledge that there is an objective truth does not mean that there is no objective truth. The objective truth is always there, even if no one will believe or accept it. So that is the danger that cultural relativism brings to the world. Okay? They will just say that because there is a disagreement between different practices, then there is no more objective truth. And what are the consequences if we try to adopt this kind of thinking? Na ay tulog. Okay? First, we cannot call out societal practices that promote harm. Okay? Now, example nga gigamit din is the practices, the anti-Semitic views of the Nazis during the World War II. They believe that the other races, particularly the Jews, are inferior compared to the Nazis, to them. That is why ilahang ginapatay. But if we believe in the concept of cultural relativism, then that means that we cannot call out or condemn this kind of actions. Ano man? Because we believe that different societies have different moral codes. So all the more nga, dili nimo ma-criticize sila, also you cannot kanang take action upon them because you will just say nga ay mo man na ilahang practice dito, different societies have different moral codes man, wala may objective truth nga nagagovern sa atoa, lahi man pud atoa, lahi pud ilaha. That is how they believe. Okay, mo nang kalisod karon if we try to subscribe in the cultural relativism, particularly on this argument. Okay. Now, ikaduha, if we cannot call out other societies, all the more we cannot also criticize our own culture. Because the determinant lang of what is right and wrong is whether you are acting in conformity of the standards set upon by your society. So, for example, sa classroom setting, miingon ta nga cheating is all right as long as you are not caught. Okay? Okay ra nga mangilad or okay ra nga manikas basta di lang ka masakpan. Mo na practice And you agree together with your classmates, ane, sige. Now, one person, a transferee from another class, will enter into your classroom and he will say nga, "Uy, dili man na tama." Because even if dili ka masakpan, cheating is cheating and cheating is wrong. He will say. But you will just argue with him nga, I am just acting in accordance, in conformity with what is under accepted as correct in this group. Therefore, I am not wrong. I am correct. Okay? Nakita ninyo? Ang basis lang in order to say that you are acting right is whether you are acting in conformity with what your group believes in. In a in a wider setting, kung sa may impact ni ini, pananglitan sa inyuhang syudad, i-accept lang nga okay ang slavery. Now, ikaw, kung naa ka nagpuyo din ha, naa kay slaves, you are not wrong. You are just acting. You are correct because you are just acting in conformity with what is being practiced in your society. Okay? So mo na nga lisod na kay na karon kay kung sa among society nag-accept mi nga okay ra day mo patay, di kung mupatay ko and because I am acting in conformity with the society, okay ra. And that is not true. Okay, because as we will know later, there is a universal standard that governs everything na kanang ginabase that should serve as the basis of what we should say as acting correctly or acting in accordance with rightness, righteousness, or wrong or wrongdoings. Okay? So first, we cannot call out other societies because kaya gani different societies have different moral codes. Second, the impact of this is that we cannot also criticize our own harmful practices. We just need to act in accordance with or in conformity with what is acceptable in society. Therefore, we are already doing what is right, even if it is harmful and even if it is objectively wrong. And lastly, guys, the idea of social progress becomes doubtful. Okay? The idea of social progress becomes doubtful. In what way? In order for progress to be achieved, we need to replace uh, something or some way of doing things with another way, with another better way of doing it. For example, sa atong panahon karon natay mga practices that are more efficient or that are considered more efficient in in kining doing things dinhi sa ato ang society. Like for example, sa 18th century, it is or in the previous centuries, it is acceptable that kining we just rely on human labor in order to work on the heavy things. Karon sa tuwa, because of the progress that we have achieved, we have realized that humans can make machines through their creativity that will enhance their construction work. So, mo na nga, nagya po yung manual labor, pero kanang limited na lang siya. So, more efficient siya. Makaingon ta nga, mas efficient ang among pamaagi karon tungod kay mas dali, mas paspas, mas simple, mas less ang gasto kaysa sa inyong practice sa una. So that is how progress is achieved by replacing a way of doing things with another better way of doing it. Pero dinhi guys, we cannot say that what we are doing today is better compared to them. Unsa may basis nato? Nga ang basis lang man sa correctness or wrongness sa usa ka action, sa efficiency sa usa ka action is whether it is in conformity with what is acceptable to the society. Okay? Kung sa una, walay kaning kaya karon na may DNA test in order to determine whether kanang for example sa killer bitaw ma-determine nga imuha ba ning mga kining fingerprint, imo habaning dugo, imo habaning DNA ang naa din na sa crime scene. So it can be used to prove that you are the criminal. That is a more efficient way of proving that someone is guilty of doing it. That is a better way. But it is achieved by progress, by replacing, sa una, wala may DNA test. So you can walk or you can deny a crime the basis nga walay evidence, nga dili ka matay up sa evidence. How can we prove that you are the owner of that DNA if, example, wala ka dito? Or dili ma-connect sa imuha. So, how will we achieve progress if ever there is no basis nga or universal basis nga mag-judge ta nga this is more better as compared to that practice of yours. Ano bitaw? Okay? So lisod na kaayo. This is the danger. These are the dangers of cultural relativism. However, guys, naapod siya positive impact. Okay? Naapod siya positive impact. Although daghan siya dangers, although naggalid siya og confusion, naapod siya positive impact. What are these? It warns us from assuming that our preferences are the absolute rational standard, and it teaches us to keep an open mind and to be more amendable in discovering the truth. Okay? Ano man, kining sa first manggod, I believe that not all our preferences are based on an absolute rational standard. Yes, na ay absolute rational standard as we will learn in lesson 4. One example of this is the natural law. This is present in every human. But not all our preferences, take note, preferences ang terming personal na to is based on this rational standard. That is why cultural relativism will tell you to keep an open mind. Meaning, in reality man gyud, because of our uniqueness as humans, naagay differences nga mag-exist in society. Different beliefs. Tinuod man gyud na man gyud. Na man gyud. People hold different values into different things. Some people would like to marry early. Some people would like to marry in a later age. Some people would like to have relationships at an early age. Some people would not. Now, some people would like to value money over anything else. Some people would value more spiritual things than material things. Nag-exist yun ang differences. That is why cultural relativism will remind us to keep an open mind. In what way will this be turned into a disadvantage? Remember always that there are limits and that these limits are governed by the rational or the absolute universal rational standards that determines whether an action is right or wrong. Yes, i-connect na to siya sa ato ang lesson 1 which is freedom. Yes, we are free, but we are not absolutely free. Meaning there are limits to the freedom that we possess. In this sense, yes, we can be different. Yes, we are different. But our differences should not be an excuse in order to act inappropriately, immorally, incorrectly, or act using our differences as an excuse to mistreat, to abuse, or worse, to kill another person. Okay? Na siya pros, na po siya cons. Now, in what way will we be able to understand nga cultural relativism is just should be understood in a context of having a belief in universal values. Meaning, although nag-exist yun ang cultural relativism by the fact na naagay different cultural practices matag society, there are values that are considered true to all. Mo ning gina-deny in extreme sa cultural relativism. Wala na objective truth. When in fact, there is objective values, universal values that are present in every culture or in every society that humans have created. What are these examples? Caring for the young, murder is wrong, and tell the truth. Now, how is this considered universal? If caring for the young is not universal to every culture, how else would humans, how else would the species of humans survive up until now? If all cultures do not value human life, especially in caring for the young, then how come nga nung nag-exist pa ta karon? Therefore, in some sense, nag-exist yun in caring for the young in all the cultures that have existed. Although na ay mga cultures nga different lang practices ni against lang practices na yan eh. But it does not mean sama sa pag-discover na to sa illogical argument kaganina nga katong cultural differences. And just because there is disagreement does not mean that there is no objective truth anymore. Okay? Kadua, murder is wrong. Murder is considered as premeditated killing. If killing is considered acceptable in every society, and how come nga naabot na nahurot noon ta karon? So, in every culture, we believe that human life is really sacred. That is why we care for our young and we prohibit killing. And another thing, telling the truth means honesty. How would we be able to communicate and therefore achieve social progress if in the first place we are just telling lies? Okay? Caring for the young, murder is wrong. Telling the you might ask, sir, caring for the young, anong na may mga society nga nag-believe in abortion? Murder is wrong? Ano lagi mga cultural practices wherein killing is permitted? Telling the truth? Sir, very prevalent na lagi ang corruption. Again, guys, how did we understand the cultural differences argument? Just because there is disagreement, just because there are difference in practices, just because uh, there are disagreements within different cultural practices, it does not mean that there is no more objective truth, because objective truth is there even if no one believes in it anymore, even if no one acknowledges its presence, it will always be there. Okay? Because objective meaning dili siya subject sa atuang kaugalingon lamang. Okay? Muna nga these universal values according to Rachel's are present in every society. All societies have this in common. Okay? So without this, society will not survive. Okay? And that ends our discussion on the cultural relativism and universal values in the concept of James Rachel's. Okay? Now, for the end part, the Filipino way, this is just an enumeration of our values as Filipinos. Okay? Sama sa cultural relativism, natay pros, meaning natay strengths, and naputay disadvantages o naputay weaknesses. Because the Filipino identity kasi is a mix of both Eastern and Western culture due to the fact that we have been colonialized by different nations. First Spain, then America, and then Japan. So mo na nga ang atuang kultura is halo-halo, mixed. Okay? So naay mga strengths ang Filipino characters ug naapoy weaknesses. I will not be enumerating them one by one because they are all stated here. Pero I'd like you to try to familiarize yourself with them and prove or whether they are really existing within yourself or within your society. And if it is not, then maybe it's the time that we try to rediscover our identity and intensify our practice of these values. Because values development is one way that will ensure our authentic personal development, not only as an individual, but collectively as a nation. Okay? That's it, guys, and thank you for listening.